the podcast. We got some new elements to the podcast. Make sure before we get started, you subscribe below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure also share this shit with somebody. Stop right now. Find two friends that either you don't like them, you really like them, one you like, one you don't like, your girlfriend, somebody. Send the link to the podcast. You tell them to follow, subscribe, tell them to do the whole, tell them this shit it rules. Lie to them, tell them it's awesome. So we got this Boss RC505 loop station, RC505 loop station, RC505 loop station. It's pretty cool. I got this M Audio Oxygen 49. What the fuck am I doing?
All right. The shit going on in the world with the police brutality. It's goddamn ridiculous. I didn't feel comfortable I didn't really want to do the podcast. I need to do it. I need to get back in the habit of recording, doing the podcast. But, I mean, shit is just so fucked up right now, man. All week I've been like, I've got the studio finally built. I've got all my gear in. I've gotten extra new stuff in, all the music stuff. I'm feeling great about doing the podcast. I'm inspired. I've been working hard to get all this, to get to this point. This is what it's all been about. And then George Floyd is murdered. It had released this like whole awakening in me about what people always try to tell you about being a white person is. And I'm not going to do that on this podcast. And maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm not going to sit here and talk about that. All I know is that shit's fucked right now. No matter what you think about anything, you got to look at the police action going on in the street right now and be like, what the fuck is going on? You know, when they get they have tear gas canisters, rubber bullets, they're shooting people, and they're knock out this old man, and he's bleeding out of his head. I mean, the world is on fire right now, dude. I don't know if I believe in, like, God, you know? But when people talk about the end of times, dude, this has probably got to be it. Like, this has got to be it. So what I got to say is,
welcome to my room with David Chastain. This shit is my motherfucking podcast. And I'm going to try to do this shit every week, twice a week, for the time being. I'm going to do, at first, it's just going to be me. Maybe I'll try to get in 2 episodes a week. I'm going to start having guests. I'm going to start having all types of guests. And I'll do 1 guest episode a week and 1 solo episode a week.
So that's how we're going to do it. It's so tiring. I imagine thinking about how, like, people that got to deal with it all the time. I've been, like, heavy dealing with it, reading, researching. I'm in it for, like, 9 days, you know. But there's some people, it's like life. You're in it for life. And that's what we're doing here. We're in it for life.
We're in it for life. Here in the podcast, kicking it old school. Here, yeah, doing the real, doing the lifetime sentence of the podcast. That's not sensitive, yeah. Gotta be sensitive, gotta be real, gotta tell it like it is. Alright.
So I just want to get all that out of the way before we get started. This is a great way to start episode 1. It's episode 1 of the My Room podcast with David Chess. I just want to let you know, I'm not the guy that's going to, like, give groundbreaking ideas about any of this, but I am upset by it. It's horrible. It's hard to believe. There's a lot of people that want to deny what's going on or not accept it, and I think it's because it's hard to believe that you can live in a world where that's the kind of stuff that can go on, and it's always been like that. And it's also, people tell you it's never been better, and they're right. It's never been better than now, and that's how bad it's been. So welcome to my room. I'm David Chastain. I'm going to try to not talk about a lot of that stuff, and instead I'm going to try to talk about some stuff I do know about, like the UFC fights. They announced Fight Island, which is beautiful. I don't know if you guys are paying attention. If you're not big UFC fans, just turn off the whole episode because there's nothing to talk about. All the sport, you got to remind yourself, the sports are all dead. Everything's dead. Comedy's dead. It's just coming back to life. And I'm trying to start a podcast. My whole life is sports and comedy, and I've been in this room for 3 months. So it's a good time for me to start my career in talking to people and being entertaining. It's a really good time because I got so much stuff to talk and to entertain about. But So this episode, well, we're just gonna talk about the UFC fights because the world's on fire, and I'm not a political leader. I'm a white guy. I'm wearing his dinners. I'll support, but I don't know what else to say. So Fight Island. Let's listen to this, huh? This is beautiful.
Yeah. Fight Island, UFC. It's on. It's in Abu Dhabi. Yeah, so
The UFC has finally announced the location of Fight Island. Dana White is falling apart. I don't know if you've been watching him on the media, dude. In the midst of all this Fight Island stuff, they've got some of their biggest stars in the UFC are complaining about their pay right now. So Jon Jones, greatest MMA fighter of all time, if you're not familiar, he's undefeated. He's only got one loss on his record. He lost to Matt Hamill, who is a deaf man. He lost to him maybe 10 years ago, and he lost by disqualification because he beat the shit out of him so hard that it was against the rules and they disqualified him. So that's Jon Jones' only blemish on his record is a disqualification to a deaf man, which is an insane thing to think about. Shout out to the Hammer. Matt Hamill? Matt the Hammer Hamill? Mark Hamill's the Star Wars. So Jon Jones he wanted to go up to the heavy. He's the 205 champion. He's undefeated at 205. He wanted to go up to heavyweight. The cap is 265. He was going to fight Francis Ngannou, which is like he's the scariest, most powerful striker the UFC's ever seen. And that's the fight everybody wants to see. Everybody wants to see Jon Jones and Francis. But the UFC, if you don't know this, we're going to break it all down today because Dana White went on ESPN, and I don't know who this guy was that was standing in place of Stephen A. Smith, but that guy is a baller. That guy called out Dana White straight up on the pay discrepancies for all the UFC fighters. He was talking about unionizing the fighters, how the fighters have never made enough money, how in every other sport the revenue split between athletes and the company is 50%, 47%. It's somewhere in that ballpark. At the lowest, it'd be like 42%. And in the UFC, it's anywhere from like 19 to 12% revenue share. At the max, the revenue share for the fighters is only 19% total, which, again, if you're not into sports, you've turned it off already. You don't give a shit about any of this. But this reporter, I need to look up who he was, he went right at Dana White, and Dana does the classic thing where he always skirts the issue, and he's talking about, Jon Jones just signed a new deal months ago. Masvidal just signed a new deal months ago. I have contracts with these guys, and I honor my contracts, and I've always honored my contracts, and if these guys wanted a new deal, it's not like these guys' deals are 2 and 3 years old. They were signed months ago. And what's unfortunate, these guys are signed 7 or 8 fight deals, and Dana White's trying to – this is essentially for a guy like Jon Jones or George Masvidal, that's the rest of their career. They're not going to have more than 8 more fights for sure. I mean, there's no way Masvidal or Jon Jones is going to have 8 fights for the rest of their career. It's just not going to happen. They're getting too old. So this reporter goes right at Dana White, and he's like, hey, man, maybe the issue is that you've never had good contracts for your fighters, that you've never really looked out for the fighters, that they don't really know how to look out for themselves, and it's a sport where they haven't been taught how to look out for themselves. And the guy describes to Dana what everybody knows, that when a fighter gets into the UFC, at first all they want to do is fight. They just want to be able to fight, and they want to make money fighting. And they do these, they 10 to show, 10 to win, which is like the first contracts you'll get in the UFC, $10,000 to fight, and if you win or lose, you get $10,000. And if you win, you get an extra $10,000. So what that you need to know, if you fight in the UFC and you lose, you're only going to get half your money. And if you look at these payouts, sometimes these fighters that fight each other, the loser of the fight ends up making more money than the winner just because they fleece the UFC on the contract, or they're a more desirable. Like you look at, I think Tony Ferguson made the same amount as Justin Gaethje in the last fight, even though Justin Gaethje beat the shit out of him. But anyway, regardless, the UFC sets everybody up to only be able to make half their money if they lose. And so these guys start their career, they're just feeling lucky and blessed to be able to make money being fighters. And then if they get good and they think they might be able to make a run at a title, they want to win and they want legacy. So they sacrifice money now for opportunity and for winning, because they just want to be a company man. They just want to be a fighter. They just want to have their legacy established. They don't want to let money stand in the way. And they also think, if I go out and I show out and I show what I'm made of, then they'll take care of me later, they'll pay me later. And it's not the case. You've seen this with guys like Nate Corey, a former great UFC fighter, Josh Thompson, who was a UFC title contender, and he lost a close title fight, and then he gets cut from the UFC before he gets another fight just because he wants to talk about money. He wants to talk about, why am I not getting paid more? And Dana always twists it, and he talks about how long ago they signed the deal, and he always honors his contracts. But God bless this reporter, he wouldn't back down from Dana. He goes, well, and Dana goes, okay, and you're only talking about 2 guys. He's like, right now, of all the fighters, I got over 600 fighters on contract in the UFC, and you're only talking about 2 guys talking about their money. And the reporter goes, for now, maybe you got 2 guys. For now, and Dana's been going through so much with the book in the Fight Island, and he's trying to get his nut for the WME contract that they've got signed. So he's like barely holding it together. But this guy, he wasn't saying anything that was untrue, and Dana really, it's the first time I've seen a reporter or anybody kind of hold Dana White out and show everybody his true nature with the money and how he'll lie about the fighters. He's talking about, he hasn't laid anybody off. He hasn't asked anybody to take less money. And it's out there right now. They asked Masvidal to take half the money he made against Nate Diaz to fight Usman for the real title. He fought Nate Diaz, a guy that was sitting on the couch, loved Nate Diaz, but he was on the couch. He was sitting on the couch for years. And he comes out and he fights him and makes way more money. Masvidal makes way more money than he's ever made, and then he's going to fight for the real welterweight title against Usman, and they're giving him 50% of the money he got to fight Diaz. I mean, he's saying he's not paying people less than they were making. He's paying right there. He's offering Masvidal less. So it's just weird. Like right now, you're looking at all these sports leagues trying to come back. You got, the MLB might not come back because all these guys, these players, they want their money. They care about legacy in baseball a lot. So they're looking at, if we have less games, that means that's gonna affect my career statistics. That's gonna affect how many pitches were able to be thrown, how many at-bats were able to be taken. It's going to affect my batting. It's going to affect all this stuff that they care about. And then they just care about the money and their safety. And of course, I get it. But that's kind of on full display right now is MMA. MMA and sports in general with the revenue splits between athletes and the company. It's kind of crazy, everything going on right now. People that have been told forever, this is how this works, this is how that works, this is how it's always going to work. They're really starting to question like the billionaires and the owners and people that run the stuff and they make the rules with the money. People are starting to go, well, does it really have to be that way? Because the athletes are starting to go, oh, you have no product if you don't have us. Why are we allowing ourselves to make so much less just because you're saying we won't have the opportunity if we don't do it? So, and this is what sucks about the UFC being able to unionize and fighters getting fair pay. Masvidal is supposed to fight Usman for the title, right? And he's refusing. And Dana White is in a very precarious situation with the coronavirus and not being able to have a gate, not being able to have attendance. So all that revenue for the UFC is gone. So of course they don't want to pay fighters more right now. But these are guys, Masvidal's talking about getting paid as much as he got paid to fight Diaz. Jones is talking about just getting paid more to fight Ngannou. On his contract, of course, he's got this contract. If he just fought the next guy, if he fought Jan Blachowicz or if he fought Reyes for a sequel fight, of course, maybe it'd be more reasonable for him to take. But he's stepping up and fighting Ngannou, the scariest fucking guy that anybody's ever seen in their life. And you're not going to incentivize him to step up and why? I mean, it's just selfish and greedy by the UFC. And just bring it back to Masvidal. Masvidal is he's the number one contender. He's the clear-cut fan favorite. Everybody wants to see him fight for the title right now. Now, Gilbert Burns fought the other night, and he fought Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley, former welterweight champion. He was the number one contender. Burns beats Woodley decisively. I think he beat him he had a 10-8 round in a unanimous decision to Woodley. He cut him bad in the first round, rocked him bad at the very beginning of the fight, and for the whole fight, just had him on Trouble Street. I don't know if that's what they call it, but had him on Easy Street. What do you call it? Dream Street. Dream Street. That's the one. So Burns wins the fight to Woodley. This is a week ago. And because Woodley is the number one contender, and this is what you need to know about the UFC, they own all manner of production. They own vertically and horizontally every bit of all. The fighters have their own management, but the promotion is the UFC, the contracts with the UFC. They don't There's nothing independent about that. The UFC is daddy. They own it all. They own all of it. So when Gilbert Burns beats Woodley, they know, the UFC knows that they're having issues with Masvidal. The UFC decides their own ranking. There's no independent ranking system for the UFC. So after Burns, who was probably 6th in the welterweight division, he beats Woodley, they automatically make him the number 1 contender. He jumps Masvidal, he jumps Colby Covington, he jumps all these guys because he beat Woodley. And now the UFC has an easier claim when they decide to go with Burns versus Usman at Fight Island instead of Masvidal, because the people in the media, they can't go, well, you got to go next man up. You got to get the next guy. Well, Burns is the number 1 contender. He just beat the number 1 contender. But it's like we've been waiting to have Masvidal fight for the title for almost a year now. I mean, ever since he beat, who's the last guy he beat? He beat Ben Askren, and then he beat Nate Diaz. And I mean, and before that, he beat Darren Till, knocked Darren Till out on a last-minute fight, took the main event in Liverpool, beat Darren Till in Liverpool in front of his home crowd. And then he goes in the back and he fights Leon Scott on camera. I mean, the legend of Masvidal is so great. And Dana just doesn't give a fuck, dude. I mean, he's not going to lose money right now. I really think the UFC is probably in a hard place with money. I mean, they would never admit it. And Dana goes out and he gets on and he tells this guy, this reporter, I'm going to look up his name. He tells him, he's like, I'm not crying about this. I'm not crying about we're having a hard time making money, and I'm not crying about that we don't have a gate, and that and he says all this stuff, and it's like, well, you are crying about it. You're saying about how hard it is to run a business and what you got to do every day, and this is the hardest time in your life in the UFC. You're saying I'm not crying about it, but that he is crying about it. It's just, Dana's a good guy. You can't hate Dana White. He's made the UFC what it is today, and he could take his money and just go sit down and not run the UFC right now, but he wants to. And he wants to because he likes the idea of being like the cool guy. The guy that we're going first, we're getting out there, we're blazing the trail. That's what Dana White likes to do. But he's also a businessman, and he's straight up lying on these guys that we love, that the fans love. And he just doesn't have to do that, because some people are going to believe him, and it's going to hurt their reputations. And again, to bring it back to the whole point of Masvidal, keep you on a tangent. Masvidal, Burns just straight up, it'll be hard to get equality for the pay, or not equality, but just like fair pay and a fair revenue split, and to unionize the fighters, because a guy like Burns is always going to step in and undercut Masvidal and take the title fight, because the title fight is obviously Masvidal's. Dana has been in press conferences and on TV talking about Masvidal and Usman is obviously the next fight. It's the fight everybody wants to see. It's the fight we're making, because everybody's talking about Masvidal and Conor McGregor. Everybody's talking about McGregor's trying to fight Usman, and Dana's like, no, it's going to be Masvidal versus Usman for the title. That's what we're doing. And when Masvidal tries to use a little bit of his leverage to get more money, Dana just goes to the next guy. He's like, who else wants it? Who else wants to fight for the title? And they don't look out for each other. They just want either the legacy or the opportunity to work or to get the title. And they're not thinking of it. So Gilbert Burns in the long run is going to screw himself over, and he's not going to be able to get the money that he could have gotten. Now, will Gilbert Burns end up being a star like Masvidal is? Probably not. Is he going to be capable of making the kind of money that Masvidal makes? Probably not. But it's just a shame. In the fight, it's the fight game. UFC normally does a great job in the matchmaking. They don't let things stand in the way. But, John Jones and Masvidal, right now, they're trying to prove a point. They're trying to stand up for the future for other fighters that are coming up that don't have the foresight to do it for themselves. And it's a shame that the fighters can't get themselves on the same page. It's kind of... It's hurtful to be a fan of those guys and for Burns and Usman. For Usman to take the fight, he shouldn't have signed the contract. I mean, he's got one of the greatest managers in the game in Ali Abdelaziz. I can't remember how to say his last name, but he manages Usman, he manages Henry Cejudo, he manages Khabib, he manages Justin Gaethje, he manages all these great fighters, and they should have. I mean, maybe they don't want to fight Usman, or maybe they don't want to fight Masvidal, but. Somebody should stand up and be like, we're not going to allow Dana White to just undercut us and undercut the fighters and then rob you of the pay and keep the revenue split what it is. It's unfair. And nobody really knows the terms with the pay-per-view model where guys that headline the fight used to make a lot of points off the pay-per-view. Now it's all on ESPN Plus, and it's a subscription-based model, and they're not selling as much right now, so the point system for making that is different. And the relationship with ESPN and WME, why is that not making sense for more income for the fighters? It's like you've involved ESPN, you've involved WME, and it's like nothing has changed for the pay for the fighters. I mean, you look at what boxers make. Look at what Deontay Wilder could make $80 million in a fight. Tyson Fury make $80 million. Floyd Mayweather can make $170 million in a fight. But these UFC guys, at Conor will make the most. Conor McGregor will make the most money, and he might make, $5 million or something like. I don't know exactly. He's one of those guys though where he has pay-per-view points that are higher than anybody else. They have a deal with him, and then he gets paid by contract more than anybody else as well. And he now has Proper 12 Whiskey is an official sponsor in the fights. When he fights, it's on the map. So, maybe they've seen what happened with Conor, and they realize they can't allow stars in the sport to happen. Like, they only need one of those guys at a time or a couple of those guys at a time, and they have to manage how not. Because you got to think, when you're losing, when you have to pay a guy millions more, you could have made millions more. And that's just the simple math, and that's what they don't want to do. They don't want to help these guys out. And that's a shame, because Fight Island is happening. It's in Abu Dhabi. Oh, yeah. Let's go to the logo for a second. Let's check out this sweet logo.
Fight Island, it's a bitch-ass scam. Dana White wants to rob the fighters of money. He wants to make them fight in the sand.
Whatever. So, I don't even know if you notice, Fight Island is not even a fucking real island. It's on Yas Island. Y-A-S. This is how you know we live in a simulation. Fight Island is on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. It's a man-made island. It's just a fucking place in the middle of the desert with some water around it. They put a cage on the beach so the guys can go out, and when they do their open workouts, they're going to work out on the beach, and they have to work out in the sun, in the desert, in the middle of summer. So it's great. It's really good for the fighters. I know that they have a plane that's taken them there. They weren't even telling these guys like where it was. They were having all these fighters sign their contracts to fight on Fight Island. They were sending them Fight Island t-shirts, not even including in the contract where the island was, where the location was going to be, how their camps were going to have to work out. But I know the fights that they did make, despite Usman Masvidal, despite not making Jones and Ngannou, some pretty good fights. They're going to have at UFC 251, it's going to be Usman versus Burns. And I think they're going to have Holloway versus Volkanovski for the 145-pound title. And they're going to have DC Stipe 3. It's going to be the headline. No, wait, that might be 252. That is 252. So I know they're going to have, it's Masvidal Burns, and it's Volkanovski Holloway, Namajunas Andrade 2, and Aldo versus, who's he fighting for the title? Aldo Petterjan. That's who he's fighting. So it is a good card. It's literally 4 good fights, though. I mean, I looked at the rest of the card. It's nothing of note. They even advertise in the bottom. It's like Paige Van Zandt's fighting, just because she's hot girl. She got breast implants. She hot girl. She hot girl breast implants. So the first fight card of UFC 251 at Fight Island, it's gonna be good, but no Masvidal, and that's a fucking crime. Because Masvidal fought in Bodog fight, which they went and fought on the beach and trained on the beach and shit. That was off the hook. I think he beat Eve Edwards or Eve Levine or Eve Edwards, I think. Eve Levine is a referee. He's a fucking small French guy. Look, DC Stipe 3, we're glad to get it. But everybody goes, now Francis is going to get his dance partner for his heavyweight title fight. But you don't know if DC, no matter what happens, Daniel Cormier is going to retire after the fight. He will retire. Win or lose, DC's done. Also, Stipe has been fighting like once a year and a half, and he loves being a firefighter, and he loves his family, and the UFC shows him no love because they've been unable to promote him and make money off of him. So he's not pleased with the brass at the UFC. In his last title, when he beat DC, he took the belt out of Dana White's hand and gave it to his coach to put on his waist after he won. It was insulting to Dana. So Dana's burning all these bridges with his fighters. Your heavyweight division is about to be cleaned out. You've made like the last fight you can make. You're not planning ahead by making Jones Ngannou. And then still, no matter what, if Jones loses to Ngannou, he's not going to fight heavyweight again. I guarantee you that. Or unless they give him a rematch, which I could see happening. And Ngannou would keep fighting in the heavyweight division if he lost to Jones. And if Jones won, he's your number one contender. Or in a situation where DC and Stipe are both gone, your vacant title fight is John Jones, Francis Ngannou. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And even if those guys don't, if Stipe wins and he doesn't retire and he holds the belt, then you're setting up your obvious number one contender fight between Jones and Ngannou. I just don't understand how you don't. Your divisions are dead. Your divisions are dying. I mean, 155 is the only 155. 145 is pretty good. 170 is pretty good. And that's it. I mean, the bantamweight is okay. I mean, you got your 135, your 145, 155, 170. That's your only divisions that are interesting at all. The women's divisions have been completely dominated by superior champions. You got Zhang Weili, unbelievable. I mean, how many times can she fight Joanna Jędrzejczyk? How many times can Joanna fight for the title after she loses to these contenders? I mean, I can name them all the interesting female fighters to watch. You can name them all right now. It's Valentina Shevchenko, Rose Namajunas, Jessica Andrade is pretty good, Amanda Nunes, who is probably close to retirement, and then whoever else I said that I forgot to mention again, the Weili Zhang. That's it. And Joanna Jędrzejczyk. There's like no other technical great. Claudia Gadelha, it was good, but she lost her last fight. She should have won the decision, and she didn't get it. Michelle Waters, and then people like to watch like Michelle Watterson and Mackenzie Dern. I mean, like they're okay. Michelle Watterson's pretty good, but they're not like that incredibly skilled. It's just like your women's divisions are not full of great fighters yet, and then your men's divisions are just like they're kind of dead outside of 4 central divisions. In the matchmaking, it seems like the matchmaking has not been as good lately as it has been in recent years. You know, Lorenzo Fertitta was such a brilliant matchmaker, and he just would do the simple thing that made sense. He would just do the thing that made sense because it was good for business. And Dana kind of lets the money and the grudge and the personal thing, I think, cloud the decision that he'll make. Not as much as he would never admit that, but you know, he's glad to see a guy like Woodley continue to lose, and so maybe he can cut him. He's glad to see these guys that give him problems. Like, he doesn't care. He's going to make money, and he's going to be rich, and he's going to be Dana White. He'll put on events, and his ego will be unchecked no matter what. But it's just sad to see that he's going out of his way to slander certain guys and to just deny the fans the fights that should be made. I mean, you make Usman Masvidal. You make Jones Ngannou. You do make a fight for Conor. They won't make a fight for Conor. Wants to fight. Conor McGregor just retired right at 6 a.m. Ireland time, which was like 1:30 in the morning after the fight ended in Vegas. And he retires because and it looks like he's just trying to get attention, or it's like, oh, we've seen this before, we don't believe it. But he's retiring because they won't give him a fight. He was like, I want to fight 3 times this year. Let me fight Gaethje in July. Let me fight Anderson Silva. Let me fight somebody. And they won't let him fight because they don't want him to lose, because if he loses, they can't justify making the Khabib fight again. So they know they can just give him the Khabib fight again, even though that's the last guy he lost to. And he beat Cerrone, who was coming off 2 or 3 losses, and to Gaethje. Gaethje had just beat Cerrone, just stopped him, and then Conor, instead of fighting Gaethje, the contender, he comes in and he fights Cerrone. Instead of fighting Poirier, who lost to Khabib, who Conor has fought before and beaten, and Poirier could have a chance to avenge a loss when he fought him at 145, he chooses to fight Cerrone. because he needs to get warmed up, and the UFC doesn't want him to lose. They think that's a good fight for him. It's a good matchup, and they're right. So now, the best fighter, most entertaining, highest selling, and you got to think conspiratorial now. Maybe they don't want Conor to fight right now because they don't want to pay him. Because Conor's going to make the money that Conor makes. Dana's saying he's not going to pay fighters less. And if he doesn't have a gate, even though Conor doesn't make money off the gate, the UFC makes money off the gate. Nobody has ever made the gate. Nobody's ever made money off the gate in the UFC. Think about that. Your name could be on the marquee. You're selling all the fights. You're making 0% of the ticket sales in the arena. I mean, it's insanity. None of the revenue split from the gate goes to the fighters. So now that they don't have a gate to take in its entirety, all the money that they would pay Conor is just coming out of all the other money they'd make, and they're probably like, well, we can't afford Conor right now. We can't afford to do it. We need a gate, which is understandable, but they don't come out and say those things honestly. They're just playing. The UFC is like, I don't even know about Conor's if he wants to retire. I think Dana said, I understand that he wants to retire. He's not working. I mean, he's like burning the greatest fighter, like his boy. That's his boy. Burning him. It's bullshit, dude. I don't know. It's frustrating to be a fan of the fights like this and see another rich guy on TV just get to lie, and you don't want to believe it. It's like, it's not as consequential as systemic racism, but it's to see a guy like Dana, just because he is in the business, he's in the control in the business, he can go and just say whatever he wants, and it's taken as like the truth, and you don't want to believe that somebody would just mislead you and lie to you, but he does. He just like, and he always goes back to that reporter was talking about how maybe nobody's addressed the unfairness of the contract. Maybe it just hasn't been looked at until now that the revenue split is unfair. And Dana continues to go back. These are only two guys that are complaining. Everybody else is happy, and these guys just signed their deal months ago. They could have had an opportunity to have a better deal months ago. We're not going to rework a contract that we just signed, and I always honor my contracts. That's always what Dana says. That's like the textbook. And just to characterize it like, well, you've always, throughout the history of the UFC, unfairly paid the fighters. And maybe the UFC, you look at all these other promotions, maybe the UFC couldn't have survived. Maybe the UFC couldn't have made it. They wouldn't have been able to have the expansion and the growth that they've had if they had to pay an extra 30% revenue to fighters. Like, I mean, think about if you took 30% of their revenue away for their entire history. I mean, maybe they don't make it. Maybe they don't make it through. Maybe they don't show how valuable they are. They don't, and companies like ESPN, Disney, WME, they don't get involved because the profit margin is shown as would be 30% less over all those years. So I understand the business side of it, but it's just like it's unfair to the fighters. You got to start on a path at some point to make it fair for them, and now it seems like it's going to be the time. And Dana, he goes, people want to talk about money right now. It's a all the, he points to the MLB, and he's like, we're back, we're paying people, we're not laying people off, no one's taking less money, and these other guys, they're telling them they got to take less money, and we're not doing that. And he just skirts the issue, you want to talk about money right now? People are out of work. You want more money? People, he puts it on. He knows he's on the news and in the public eye, so he uses the perspective of the little man to go, you have less money right now, don't you? And these guys are trying to ask. So he's getting the public on his side by saying things like that, and it's pretty unfair. But you got to understand the business side of it, and you have to expect the fighters to stand up for themselves. You have to expect them to stop undercutting each other, and if it's a problem that's going to be fixed, they have to unionize, or they have to figure out a way to get the UFC to let them in on more of the money. And it's kind of hard to complain when a guy like Gilbert Burns or Usman, they continue to sign these contracts when they have the UFC needs a main event for Fight Island, and they can put the fight on without Usman on the card. They could have moved Stipe up, or they could have had Volkanovski Holloway as the main event, and Andrade and Namajunas and Aldo Peteryan, but none of those fights sell. Usman Burns hardly even sells. It's just like you've got like 3-4 title fights on the card now, so it's like, oh, maybe now we're going to pay attention. It's just, I said what I said. I don't know. I'm excited about the Holloway-Volkanovski rematch. We didn't know if we were going to get that for the 145-pound championship. Cejudo was on Rogan the other day talking about he wanted to come back. I think this was before they announced Holloway-Volkanovski when they did the interview, because he wasn't talking. They weren't talking like they knew this was coming. He wanted to come back and fight Volkanovski for the title. Now Cejudo couldn't fight Holloway. It's a horrible matchup. But Volkanovski is a shorter guy, and he's bigger than Cejudo. But I think Henry feels he can match up and strike and the range, his range and how he fights. Now Henry Cejudo a little later in his career adopted that kind of side stance, that karate style that Conor McGregor was very successful with. Instead of a boxing stance, he stands kind of more front. But yeah, he was going to fight. He's talking about fighting Volkanovski, and so now you're probably not going to see Cejudo return, because I do not see Holloway losing to Volkanovski again. And if he does, Volkanovski is the man. I mean, that guy, I watched the fight, and it was kind of hard to believe. I didn't think Holloway lost just because I didn't want him to lose. I love Max Holloway so much that I was like, there's no way he can lose to this guy. I don't even know who this guy is. But that City Kickboxing, imagine that. A place called City Kickboxing in Auckland, New Zealand, has got 2 champions right now in the UFC, and Dan Hooker, who he may have just lost recently, but Dan Hooker is an amazing contender in the 155-pound division. But City Kickboxing is taking over the UFC right now. Israel Adesanya, I mean, that's not a guy you've seen a lot from. He dyed his hair blonde like Eminem, so that's pretty cool. But Israel, he doesn't really have a lot of dance partners right now either. He's just going to clear out his division at middleweight, and he's going to fight. He's got some dangerous fights, like Jared Cannonier is very dangerous for him. He's a very, very good fighter. Darren Till, if he can get a couple wins pieced together. So there are some fights in the middleweight division for Adesanya, but you want Adesanya Jones next year. That's what you want. And I'm telling you, you'd let Jones go up and fight. He's got to fight heavyweight. If he fights Adesanya, he's not going to fight heavyweight. Like, he's got to fight heavyweight before he fights Adesanya. So maybe not. I don't know. I don't know how much longer Jones is going to fight. I think he's 34, 36 years old already. I mean, how much longer can this guy fight? And he can't stay out of trouble. He tries so hard. He's out there. I love the guy. And he's trying to show himself in his community, but he's out in Albuquerque taking away spray paint cans from like rioters in these protests. Like, he's out there like with a knife on his belt and like a side carry, and he's like going up the white kids, like the light heavyweight champion of the world, John Jones, big strong man, coming up on these kids and being like, "Give me your spray paint can." Can you imagine how horrifying? It's like,
"Hey, give me your fucking spray paint can, you punk ass kids."
I mean, how insane is that? You can't do that. I mean, God, but no, he didn't get in trouble. That didn't even get him in any trouble. I don't want to characterize it like that. It's good. He's doing good things in Albuquerque. He's helping. They're redoing the landscaping in the city streets, and they're repainting and helping local businesses. Great. He's trying to salvage his public image a little bit, and that's something that Dana White has always used against him. Is his past, his deep past. But I don't know, man. I love John Jones. I've been a John Jones fan since I watched him at Buffalo Wild Wings when I was in high school, beating Matt Hamill until his eyes just pulled up. I mean, I'm telling you, I had the UFC video game, and I was a big fan of the UFC at the time, and I knew Matt Hamill is a deaf guy. He's a deaf UFC fighter. He's like this wrestler guy, and they would still interview him. They would always interview him, and I don't want to do an impression, but he talks like a deaf guy, and he's like, I'm just here to fight, and I want to win. I want to be champ. And they're just interviewing this deaf guy, bro. And then they let him go out there and just get beat to death by John Jones. And they stopped the fight, and nobody knew what was happening. And then they come out, the referee announces the decision, and they disqualified John Jones. Everybody in the Buffalo Wild Wings freaked out. They're like, what's going on? John Jones and his whole team, they're freaking out. They don't know what's going on. 12-6 elbow rule is stupid. It's dumb. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's horrible. They don't let you go like this and elbow a guy in his head, but they let you go like this and elbow a guy. They'll let you do whatever kind of elbow. I could lay on the back and elbow a guy like that, but I can't elbow like that. It's fucking dumb. Anyway, I don't know, maybe the last thing I'll talk about, Gaethje Khabib finally booked September 13th. We're going to get to UFC 253. Finally, a fight that people want to see. I hope to God they don't. What if they make Gaethje fight Conor before? I mean, I think they booked. This is what we're lucky. This is why we're lucky. That Khabib and Gaethje have the same manager. That Ali, he represents Usman, he represents Cejudo, he represents all those guys. And he's not afraid to stand up to the UFC, especially when both fighters are he represents both of them. So I think we're going to get Gaethje, because Khabib doesn't want to fight Conor again yet. He's like, I got to fight Gaethje. Gaethje deserves it. Or he would have fought Ferguson if Ferguson beat Gaethje. Like, Khabib is one of those guys, he's already rich, and he lives with his entire family, like his kids and his parents, and they just live in a house in Dagestan together. Just like simple, humble living. They, fast for Ramadan or whatever for like a whole year. I don't know how that works, but so this is a guy that you can't really intimidate with the business stuff. And now they didn't want him to. They didn't give him a title shot for so long. And then when they finally couldn't deny him, he's the champ, and no one's ever going to beat him. I don't think anyone will beat Khabib. Gaethje's got the best chance because his striking is going to make. Like, Khabib is going to have to manage his distance a lot better than he has with everybody else. And you look at when he fought Conor, Khabib stayed a lot on the outside. He stayed at a lot further distance than maybe you're used to seeing him. In his last couple fights, he's been doing that. He stays at a way farther out of striking distance, and he'll just shoot, and he goes for that ankle. And Gaethje is going to pressure Khabib. Khabib normally puts the pressure. He kind of puts the pressure from a distance, and Gaethje is going to hit him with the low calf kicks. It's going to be tough to manage the distance like that for Khabib, because Gaethje's left hook is long and it's sneaky. It's really fast, and the way he comes in, he can lay the leg kicks on you very, very close when you're not expecting it. And he's an unbelievable defensive wrestler. He was talking about he had a match against Jordan Burroughs, he's got the greatest power double in like the history of wrestling. He's like the greatest wrestler on the planet right now as far as a power double wrestler goes. And he said he defended for a whole round. He defended it, and then he finally got with the double. But he gets everybody. Like that guy, Jordan Burroughs just had a match against Ben Askren, and he tore his ass apart, man. So Gaethje is, if his defensive wrestling is as good as he says it is, and he's a former, All-American wrestler. I think he was a national champion. So Justin Gaethje's wrestling, you've never seen him wrestle in like the last several years. Since he's learned to strike, he's become an amazing striker. And he only wrestled in like the first 5 fights of his professional career. Or maybe not even. Maybe the first 5 fights of his amateur career. So he's probably going to spend all camp wrestling, getting ready for Khabib. And then Khabib is going to take those leg kicks, and he's going to take some shots. And we're just going to see if Khabib's wrestling can stand up against Gaethje, and if Khabib can take any of the shots, if he can take the leg kicks. Because you saw how Iaquinta's a real hard-nosed Long Island guy. He trains with Matt Serra. And because of like the toughness of Iaquinta and how he chose to manage his distance, Khabib wasn't able to take him down at will the way that we've seen with other fighters. And Iaquinta's not as good of a wrestler as Gaethje. And I don't know if Khabib has faced as good of an all-around fighter that's as good of a wrestler as Gaethje. Maybe in his past he's faced some really, really good wrestlers, and undoubtedly in his freestyle wrestling career, and I don't know if he's had any sambo matches, but it's going to be a hard way to go for Khabib, and it's the most interesting fight. I love when these fights come up where you're unsure of what's going to happen. The outcome is so much more unsure than the Conor-Khabib fight. Like, I was pretty certain Khabib would smash Conor. I mean, because of his profile, you don't want to believe Conor's going to lose, and you think he's always got a chance. But I thought that the same thing would happen to Conor that happened to everybody else, and it did. And now we're going to see, and the same thing happened to Poirier. Poirier got eaten up. He got some good shots in. He tried his hardest. But Khabib Gaethje and if Khabib dominates Gaethje, there's nobody in the division at 155 that could ever fuck with him. It's just true. I mean, he's proven it to you. Khabib can't lose to anybody at 155 ever. I mean, it's never going to happen. So the only thing left for him would be to fight a guy like GSP or Usman, which he wouldn't fight Usman because it just doesn't make. Again, it's like they share the same management, and that's not. They don't need to do that. They're not in the same division. But GSP, oh man, I want Gaethje to win. This is what I want. I want Gaethje to win, so that Gaethje can fight Conor, and then maybe a Khabib rematch, or if not, you can still get the Conor Khabib fight just for no title. And then it just becomes like it's a grudge match. That's almost better. So I think the matchmaking, they should just hire me to be the matchmaker at the UFC. I'll just throw money out the window. I'll say, I don't give a fuck about the money. I'll just be the guy that tells you the truth, who gives a fuck about money. And I'll just be honest with you. And you can pay me a lot of money. You can have a revenue split with me. How about that, Dana White? You piece of shit. I got to look up who that guy was with Max Kellerman. I mean, that guy was so good. Replaced Stephen A. forever. He was so intelligent and well-spoken. He made incredibly good points, and Stephen A. just screams at you. And Stephen A. is fine, but this guy, I could deal with this forever. I could deal with that guy forever. Dominique Foxworth. There we go. Dominique Foxworth. Unbelievable reporting. You're a great guy. We love you. Replace Stephen A. Smith forever, please. I hate the way the media works right now, and that guy is just like an intelligent. He broke him down. He didn't let him hide from the questions. And Dana White continued to repeat his typical script, and the guy was too smart for him. And he just pointed out he literally pointed out what Dana White was doing, pointed it out, and then Dana did it again, and he goes, "Hey, you're doing it again." He goes, "Hey, I know you're saying you're not crying, but you're crying." Crying, Dana's crying. Oh, horrible singer. Here we go. Well, guys, I think this will end it for the podcast. We'll do a short episode. Again, a lot of people, they want you to... I can't shine so much light on what's going on in the world right now. I'm happy in a sense that people are finally waking up and they're getting out there and they're... I mean, look at all the people in the street. It's inspiring. It's hurtful. It brings out the happy-ass music. It brings out, like, the hurt in you, that the people that deny it and still want to deny the change and show their ignorance on what side they want to stand on. You see all these people, white people, that are, when the issues get brought to them about police brutality or racial injustice, and they're like, what about immigration? What about Nancy Pelosi, deep state QAnon? And it's like, man, we're not talking about that right now. And it just shows how they literally will show you that they're not even going to care to broadcast or let your issues take up their mental space, and they don't agree. And that's what the passive. That's what I've been learning, the passiveness of like people and the passive racism. And it's hard for me to say this. I still don't want to believe how cruel people can be and how ignorant people can be. And I know that I'm ridding myself of my own ignorance lately, but even still, when I'm in my ignorance, I wasn't like blatantly hurtful, or if I was ever like hurtful, it's because of like some microaggression thing, and I'm trying to learn about what that means right now too, because the canceling Second City. Maybe I'll talk about that. Chris Red, I saw, posted something on Instagram about they've requested Second City to make themselves accountable and self. I don't know if you call police yourself, and they're pretty much calling to get rid of a lot of administrative staff, directing staff, creative staff that have not appreciated and maybe even degraded the black alumni and current membership of the Second City. If you're unfamiliar with Second City, it's an improv group. I know they're in Chicago. I think they're in San Francisco. They might be in Canada too. But it's the biggest improv group. Like, it's anybody that's done SNL or like Mad TV or something. Most of these people have done Second City. Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell. I mean, there's so many of these people who were in the Second City. And I guess that black people had a tough go with the Second City. They haven't always been appreciated and recognized and valued for their contributions. And maybe even that people in the administrative staff and directive staff have, when it comes to the word microaggression, what that means is asserting stereotypes or treating something in a different way and it's derogatory because like this was a speaking loudly and more clearly to black people. That was like the most offensive thing. It offended me. I was like, who does that? It was like a microaggression would be speaking like loudly to people of color. It's like, what is that for? Who would do that? I didn't know that was one. Because, I mean, that's not very micro to me. That's like you're insinuating that somebody would be stupid because of the color of their skin. That's like so offensive. Again, these are the things that I can't believe they still exist. I've never just had the impulse to just act like that somebody was dumber because of what they look like. That's insane to me. But it's the truth, I guess. It's what people are not. I guess it's the truth. That's what happens. It's what's happening. It's what's been happening. And Chris Redd, very funny comedian. I gotta you looked at some of the signatures. These people, they were like, well, you got 72 hours to respond, or what do they burn it down? I don't know what they're gonna do, or just bring further action, further attention to dissatisfy their offense. They're offended at the Second City. They don't like it, and it's fine. I mean, I was thinking about auditioning for Second City instead of I might reassess. I don't know, but everything right now, I am proud on the front that people are finally being courageous enough to stand up to people, that they're not going to take things lying down, and they're not going to go, well, just because you have some inkling of control in my life, or you can hold something over my head like my income or my livelihood or my career or whatever, I'm not going to let you do that to me. I'm going to stand for what I know is right, and I'm going to speak on what I know is the truth, and you should be held accountable. You shouldn't get to skirt the issues and because you got money. It's bullshit. So thank you for tuning into the podcast today.
It's been a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally got to this. Has been episode 1. Please make sure you subscribe below. Hit that subscribe button and take the link. Share that link. Put it on Twitter. Put it on Facebook. Share it with 2 of your friends in a text message. Send it to somebody that you hate. Go, this guy was so good and I loved it. Spend 47 minutes watching this guy. And make sure you come back episode 2. I'm going to try to do these every week, twice a week. Soon, very soon, I'm moving to a new space. I'm moving to a new house. I'm going to have a whole new studio. And I'm going to do 1 solo episode a week and 1 guest episode a week. And we're going to do that forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And I'm going to get cool guests that are my friends that are comedians and people that are my friends that you wouldn't give a shit about, but they're funny people and maybe musicians. And we'll jam, we'll make some cool music. And something I do
want to say before we go, I'm going to start making, I might have mentioned this at the beginning and it might have been unclear, I'm going to start doing a whole lot more music stuff and making up songs with the guests. And if we make up cool songs and you like them, I'm going to take them and I'm going to clip them. And then once the Spotify podcast is live, that we're live on Spotify every so often, I'm going to release an album of songs, original songs from the podcast. So keep a lookout on Spotify every once in a while. I don't know what I'm going to call them yet. Maybe Jams from My Room or something like that. And Jams from My Room Volume 1, Volume 2, and you can go on there and listen to the cool clips of the music from the podcast. And we'll probably put the clips on YouTube as well, but that's just another thing we're going to do to
monetize my motherfucking podcast. I want to make some money with this dumbass shit, So thanks again for coming out. Episode 1, it's been a blast. Racism sucks. I hate it. I wish it wasn't real. I want to do something about it. I'm going to, and you should too. So make sure you subscribe and share this with your friends, and we'll end racism together. Thank you.